Today I'm going to show you how to build a gigantic workbench. This workbench is 8 feet long, 4 feet wide, 39 inches high. It has folding legs so you can fold the legs in and collapse it and store it against a wall in your garage. It also has caster wheels so it'll roll around, or you can lock the wheels in place. Let me give you some advice if you're going to build something like this. If you don't have a lot of experience working with wood, maybe take on a smaller project first. Maybe make a birdhouse or a dog house. I did a video on a dog house a year ago, maybe try that. Or build a small table. Build something else before you go and invest this much money in wood and tear it up if you don't know what you're doing. So let me talk about the cost. I've got about $260 of material cost in this workbench. So just this piece of plywood on the top was $80. So I've got the plywood, I think 12 2x4s, screws, bolts, 2 different types of bolts, caster wheels, hinges, polyurethane, and on top of that you have some tool cost. I bought new saw blades for 2 of my saws because when you spend this much money on wood, you really don't want to tear up your wood. So there's a lot of expense. Plus I've got 5 trips to the hardware store, so I have a lot of expense in this. In fact, this $260 workbench, I probably would have come out ahead if I'd have paid someone $500 to build me a workbench. I wanted to do it myself for the experience, plus I wanted to tailor it to my specific needs. But today I'm going to show you how to do this, and if you do it, just take your time and do it right. All right, let's get started. Okay, let's lay out the frame. I always cut the best pieces for the outside edges. Notice how this has a dark spot. This is a piece of bark. I'll put it on the inside so it's not visible from the outside. Okay, let's take a look at it. So I put some extra cross members in the frame just to give it some extra rigidity and strength. These 2x4s are both glued and screwed together, and they're connected into both sides. I've got some extra members that go end to end, and I'll put dimensions of all these in the comments. So I'm ready to put the legs on. The next step, right now everything is just sort of set in place just so I can line it all up. The next step is to bore the hole in here for my 5/16 inch bolts, round off the end of these so that the legs will pivot. So I'm going to take all the legs out, I'm going to bore the holes, round off the connecting points of the legs and get those connected. Okay, I found that it's best to stand your frame up when you measure and get ready to drill these holes. You can measure it standing up, but don't drill it until you have it laying on the floor and have your leg put in place. So what we need to do is drill a hole in here for the 5/16 bolt, and the hole needs to be in the exact center. So it needs to be half the width of a 2x4 this way beyond this junction and half the way down. So what I'm going to do is mark the width of the 2x4 in a couple of spots. So that's 3/4 right there. I'm going to come down a little ways and mark 3/4 again. And let me explain why I'm not using my triangle on this. Normally I would use my triangle to mark it and make a straight line. Problem is, there is the chance that this was cut at an angle. There's also the chance that the 2x4 is not completely straight. So what I'm going to do is just mark it with a ruler, and then I'm going to draw a line on the 2x4 in between those two marks. Now this needs to be pretty accurate, so you need to take your time and make sure that you do this correctly. So there's my line. That line is the halfway point from side to side. So now I've got to measure from here 1 3/4 inches down there and make another line all the way across. So let's do that. Okay, I got all my marks made where I want to drill my pivot points for my legs, but let me make a point about something to you. It's easy to get turned around when you're moving the frame side to side and you're trying to make these. Like I had to make the marks on one side, then turn the frame over and make the marks on the other side. I almost got confused and forgot which is the top and which is the bottom. And here's why that's important. If you look at the top, all these joints line up perfectly all the way down. Nothing sticks out. But if you go look at the bottom, there's actually a couple of places where the supports stick out, or things don't line up exactly perfect, like right here, okay? So the imperfect side is the bottom. Everything lines up perfect on the top, so just keep track of what's your top and what's your bottom, and it helps to actually make some marks to show which is your top. Okay, it's time to drill the holes for my bolts to go through for the legs. So I'm going to put the legs in position. I'm going to clamp the legs just to make sure they don't move while I'm drilling. Just like that, I'm going to clamp it in 2 different places. Now here's where a drill block comes in handy, okay? You drill into the drill block, wrong one. You drill into the drill block into the wood, so the drill block helps make sure your drill doesn't do that, doesn't get off center. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the drill bit through the drill block. I'm going to put the drill bit on the spot, push the drill block down, and then I'm going to drill. Okay, so now I took the drill block off, and here's why. The drill block takes up part of the length of your drill bit. So you use the drill block to make sure that you're making a hole straight in, but then you have to take it off to use the full length of the drill to go all the way through the wood. So now I'm going to push the drill bit in there and then start it up. All right, so this one's good to go. Let's go to the next. Okay, let me show you something. The devil is in the details, okay? I got 2 drill bits here. You can see that one is longer than the other, okay? That's the 1/4 inch drill bit I've been using. That's a 5/16 inch drill bit. This bolt is a 5/16 bolt. I want to use the 1/4 inch drill bit because if I drill a hole 1/4 inch, this bolt will go in snug like I want it. But here's the problem. I've got to put the 1/4 inch drill bit into the drill and connect it, but when I do, there's not enough room, there's not enough length to go all the way through the outside board and the leg. These 2 are the leg right there, okay? That's the problem. So what I have to do is use a 5/16 inch drill bit, put it in, just barely put it in the drill, and then it's just barely long enough to go all the way through. That's what they don't tell you. When you watch all the YouTube videos where people do things that look so great, they don't give you all the dirty little details that they had to figure out. They sort of skim over things sometimes. That's why I say when you're going to watch videos to figure out how to do something, watch 20 videos. Don't just watch 1 or 2. So this is that 5/16 inch drill bit. Here's the 1/4 inch drill bit. Oh, I had it backwards. Okay. There's the 5/16 drill bit, there's the 1/4 inch drill bit. So as you notice, as drill bits get bigger, they also get longer, okay? So you have to have a set of drills or a set of drill bits to figure out which one to use if you're gonna do something like this. You may want to use a smaller one, but it won't be long enough, and there's no tool you can get to extend the length of a drill bit, so you just have to use a bigger bit. So that's what I'm gonna do. Okay, I finished drilling the holes for the pivot points in all the legs and the supporting bars. So let me make a couple of points here. First point is, number these so that the leg goes with the correct place where you originally drilled the hole, so that whatever leg you had here when you drilled this hole, make sure you don't get it confused with another one, because the hole in these legs matches up to the hole there. And even though I measure everything correctly, the hole that's in that leg is matched up to that one. That hole will probably not fit with this supporting bar. So I put a 1 on that leg, it goes with this support. I put a 2 on this leg, it goes with this support. This one is 3, and this one is 4. And you know, ideally, if I measured correctly, each leg should go in any spot, but in reality, that's not the case. That's one of the things you have to think about when you're dealing with wood. Okay, I've already started cutting this leg. I cut 45-degree angles on both sides, getting it ready to put right here in the pivot point. So what I've got to do now is take the sander and round this off, and be careful for splinters. But I'm going to go ahead and cut that leg over there to show you how it works. So let's do that. So here's how we do that. This compound miter saw, let me move the camera where you can see a little better. Compound miter saw, you can turn it at different angles. I've got it on the 45-degree edge, or 45-degree angle over here, so it's going to cut off this edge. And then I'm going to turn it around to the 45-degree angle over here to cut off the other edge. So here's how that works. Just like that. Gives us a nice 45-degree cut. So I'll cut this side off, and then I'll come and take the sander and I'll sand it off and make a better rounded edge. Okay, let's sand off the edges of this, and for this you want a sander with a fairly heavy grit sandpaper. If you have an old piece of sandpaper, you can use that, because you really don't care about making this super clean. You just want to round it off as much as possible. If you don't have a sander, you can sand it by hand. It'll just take longer. You actually can use your saw and trim this a bit more, but I don't want to risk messing it up, so I'm going to use my sander. So here we go. Okay, it's time to put the legs on. I've got all of them sanded, so here's how we do this. For each leg, you got a 5/16 bolt, 5/16 inch bolt, 2 washers, a lock washer, and a nut. So you put one big washer on the outside of the bolt. You put the bolt through the support, through the leg, pop it through, put another washer there, put on your lock washer, and then put on your nut. And then tighten it down. So let's do that for all 4. Okay, I got the screws put in all 4 legs except for one. Notice that? That's a manufacturing imperfection in this one screw. So when you buy your screws, always look at them and make sure they look okay. Okay, now it's time to make some braces for the legs, so that when the legs fold up and come out, they don't actually push outward on this board. We don't want it to come too far back. So I'm going to make a brace that goes from the outside edge of that board all the way across here to the outside edge of this board. Now the reason I'm going to extend my brace out past the leg to the outside edge of this board is because when the leg's folded up, I want it to provide extra support to the outside edge of the workbench. So let's measure from there all the way over here. It's exactly 42 inches. So I'm going to cut 2 pieces, one for each end, that's 42 inches long. Okay, I got that cut. So if you build this, make sure when you put this support piece on that the legs are folded all the way up. The reason is if you fold the legs down and you screw this in position, it may not come up and fit perfectly against the bottom of this top support. And it needs to be flush right there. Also, it needs to be flush with the outside edge of this 2x4, which is our longest support piece, so that it provides support for that 2x4. So let's screw it in place. So if we fold it down, see, it looks like that. When a lot of people put these on, they have the tendency to screw this piece right here. And that way, when you fold it up, it won't go into position properly. And what you've done is you've made 2 holes here. Well, not here. You've made 2 holes here that are not necessary. So just be careful where you put this piece. Okay, let's get the top board put on and get the caster wheels put on. So what I want to do is line that up, take the hinges. Okay, I decided to use smaller screws for the hinges because I don't want these big screws to go all the way through this board because they're sort of close to the edge. I don't want them to split the board. So what I'm going to do is change from a big screw to a little screw. So this one's 2.5 inches, this one is 1.5 inches. Okay, now it's time to mount the caster wheels. So here's how this works. I'm going to put the caster wheel on the end of the board, and the center point of the caster wheel, the swivel point, needs to go directly above that seam or as close as possible. Measure it by eye, and then I've got a little over 1/8 of an inch, I think it's a 3/16 inch drill bit that I'm going to use to make a pilot hole for it. Okay, all the wheels are on, those are in place, they seem to be working okay. Everything spins freely like it should. So the last thing to do on the frame is to put this tensioner on. And what this does is when the legs are folded out, extended, this puts constant tension on them so that they push outward and they don't fold in while your workbench is set up. So to hold this in place, I'm going to use this 5/16 bolt with a wing nut. And the reason I'm using a wing nut is because a wing nut's real easy to take off and put back on. Only takes a second. So I'm going to cut this to length, drill a hole for one of these on each end, and then we're going to turn it over and put the top on. Measure our board. Let's mark it and cut it 81. Okay, this actually helped me remember something. It helps to clamp this board when you're going to cut it. The reason is I was drilling this just a second ago and it slipped off the other end and it messed up my hole. So I'm going to re-drill this with a slightly larger bit and I'm going to go drill that one. cut and finish it up. Hey little guy, you don't want to be in here. Come on, get on my finger. Let's go out here to the pine straw. That's a beetle. That's not a roach or anything dangerous, it's just a beetle. All right, we got him out of harm's way. So now let's put the plywood on. Put your kids to work whenever you get a chance. What he's doing here is sanding down the very top of the rounded surface on the legs, because as I said before, the screws don't go in exactly straight, even though I use the drill bit guide. And sometimes the wood warps, and sometimes you just make a mistake. So we had to sand it off a little bit, so my son's helping me out. Good job. Okay, time to screw down the top. So I've gone all the way down the plywood and I've penciled in a mark where I need to drill a pilot hole for a screw. So let's put some screws in. Okay, I got the plywood put on and screwed down. The table looks great and it rolls really well. So far I'm real happy with it. But I gotta fix a problem. I know that every time I walk past one of these corners, it's gonna rip my shirt or hit me in the side, sort of like this. So what I wanna do is trim off about 1 inch off the corners. I'm just gonna measure 1 inch inward from the corner each way and just cut off the very corner piece so that that point's not sticking out. I've got all 4 corners cut off and sanded really well so they make nice round surfaces. So now I want to take the sander and go all the way around and just barely sand the top and the bottom edge, because even though this is nice expensive plywood, there still are some a few splinters there. So I just want to make sure I get rid of the jagged edges. So let's take care of that. Okay, before I put polyurethane on this, I'm going to take the good vacuum and I'm going to vacuum off any of the sawdust and the dust left over from sanding it. So I want a completely clean surface so I can put polyurethane on it. Okay, so it's time to put polyurethane on. What I use is the Minwax fast drying polyurethane. It makes a nice smooth surface. So I'm going to put 2 coats of this on, but you have to stir it first. Never shake it, always stir it. If you shake it, you're going to put bubbles in it, which will mess it up. Okay, when you're applying polyurethane, first thing to remember is don't breathe it. You need to be in a well-ventilated area. Second is you need a brush that has decent bristles. This is not the newest, fanciest brush. You can tell I've used it before, but it does have fine tip bristles. Also, don't buy the cheap brush, because if you buy the cheap wooden handle brushes at the hardware store, the bristles are going to come out and they're going to stick in your polyurethane on your work surface. Third thing to remember is don't wear your nicest clothes, because once this polyurethane gets in your clothes, you're not going to wash it out. So if you get it in your clothes, it's there to stay. So just take your time, brush it on in nice even strokes, and you know, don't get in a rush. So here we go. Okay, check out how nice that end looks. I just really like the look of the layers of the wood when you put on the polyurethane. So if you're going to do the edges, you need a very, very light coating on your paintbrush. Okay, here's another reason that you want to polyurethane your edges. Let me show you. So this is where I did the top, and it dripped down, which doesn't look too great. But if you go ahead and you do the side, it looks like that. So you can either have that, or you can have that. I'd rather have that. Okay, one more quick note. So this is how the plywood looks without the polyurethane, and that's how it looks with the polyurethane. I don't know if you can appreciate it by seeing it from this angle, but that just really looks nice. That really brings out the color of the grain and the texture of the grain, I guess is the way to put it. It looks really nice, so I really like that. Okay, the next step is to very lightly sand it. I've got a 220 grit sandpaper right here, and I put it on a sponge so that I don't have a really hard surface pushing down on it. This is a easily bendable surface. So I wrap the sandpaper around that, and I'm going to go all the way over the plywood and sand it real gently, then come back with another coat of polyurethane. Okay, the workbench is completely finished. I've got the legs folded in, it's leaning up against the back wall of my garage. So when I wanted to build this, I looked at a lot of YouTube videos where people had built similar workbenches that had fold-up legs, and they would store them against the back wall. Sometimes they would store them on the wall. But this workbench is a good example of how plans that look good on paper don't always function right in the real world. For example, I wanted my workbench to be 8 feet long and 4 feet wide. It takes an entire sheet of plywood, which means I need more lumber, which means the weight becomes a problem. For example, I had to have additional supports in the center that go all the way down the length. I had to have an additional board supporting the bottom so that when I've got it laying up against the wall, the weight's not on the piece of plywood. In addition to that, all the lumber that I had to cut for this had to be longer, so that created a huge amount of additional weight. This workbench is over 200 pounds. It's way too heavy for one person to set up and then put back down and fold the legs in by themselves. It takes 2 people to set it up or to lay it down. So my son and I now are going to unfold the legs, put the leg support in place, then we're going to stand it up and give you a look at it. All right, so that's the workbench being put up. So as you can see, we have lots of polyurethane on here. It makes a nice smooth surface. I think altogether I put 7 coats of polyurethane on here so that this would not get scratched. So this is the board that's on the bottom side of it, so that when I lay it down, the weight is on this board and not on the plywood. So let's take one more look around it. See how everything is built, how it goes together. The brace that goes between the legs has a wing nut on the bottom right there that holds it in place. So this workbench is way too big to put it up and take it down every single day. So very likely we're just going to leave it up all the time, and we're going to work around it if we need to do other stuff in the garage. But this is very handy, and I think we're going to use it a lot. Thanks for watching. That's the worst video ever made.